Are there going to be questions going through the Zoom?
I'm going to say that if anyone wants to text me their question from home, they can, and I'll say my number. And so we may get some questions of people watching at home. I know that there are probably at least 50 people watching online. So a lot of people are going to hear this. Plus, we're archiving this, and anyone will probably email it to the whole congregation afterwards. So a lot of people are going to see this.
Okay.
No pressure.
So you won't be asking the question, you don't go like by student and ask all the questions, you're just going to ask questions and each has to answer it?
Exactly. You know, let's maybe center you guys. Yeah, maybe just across. Yeah, there you go. Cookies are really good. Okay. All right. Shalom, everyone. Hello. Thank you so much for coming. It's delightful to see such a nice attendance, and I know that we have a lot of people watching at home. So thank you to everybody who's joining us from wherever you are. We're going to begin. We have about an hour and 10 minutes or so for a very, very interesting panel presentation on campus anti-Semitism. And I was just going to teach about some of the findings of a Brandeis study on what's going on college campuses when I originally came, and just talk about, when I decided to do this topic, I had just come from the JNF convention where they had some of the leading experts on following what's going on college campuses, and there were a lot of college kids there, college students there, and some Hillel professionals and stuff, and they, gave some reports from what's going on campus. But then I realized it's winter break for some colleges, and some of the students are here. So how much better, instead of hearing it from me, to hear it from the horse's mouth. Now, so we have here, representing the University of Pennsylvania, University of North Carolina, Wellesley College, and Brown University. Unfortunately, these were the smartest kids I could get. This was all we could come up with. So you're looking at 4 very, very accomplished, some of our absolute best and brightest products of Temple Beth Am. And I was so honored that each one of them was able to join us today to talk about their campus. So what we're going to do is, I'm just going to ask a few questions. I'm going to let each of them answer them. And based on where they go to school, the geography of the region, the makeup of the student body, the situation on campus, maybe some things may be the same, some things may be different. So I'm going to, I have a few questions to ask, but then we're going to just open it up. And you'll have the opportunity to ask any questions. And I want to say to anyone at home, if you have a question at home, feel free to text it to me. I have my phone here. My phone number is, hopefully you have it already, 239-220-8890. 239-220-8890. You can text it to me, and then we'll, if it's a good question, if it's a terrible question, we'll ignore it. But if it's a good question, we'll ask it to the panel. Don't email it. I'm not checking my email. So please text it 239-220-8890. If you're in the room, instead of texting me, you can just raise your hand. And then I'll know. Okay, so before we begin, if I'd ask each one of our panelists, and again, thank you all very much for being here. We truly appreciate it. If you could just introduce yourself by telling us your name, where you go to school, what year you are, what you're studying, and how much you loved growing up at Beth Am, something like that. So we'll go in order just from the right, starting with Evan.
Hi, I'm Evan Galinsky. I'm a senior at Penn. I'm studying political science and film. What were the other questions? How much I love Beth Am? It's great. I love it. That's why I'm here.
Yeah.
Evan Galinsky.
Evan Galinsky. Okay.
Hi, my name is Mia Crable. I'm a junior at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I am studying international relations and Spanish, and Beth Am is my second home.
Hi, I'm Julia Buckner. I am a senior at Wellesley College. I am studying international relations, and Beth Am is like one of the best places I've ever been.
Oh, that's good stuff.
Hi, my name is Daniel Solomon. I am a sophomore at Brown studying political science and urban studies, and I love Beth Am.
Okay. So you can see you're dealing with heavyweights here. These are some of our best and brightest. All of our kids are wonderful, but I'm telling you, these are great kids. Okay, so first question I want to ask each of you, and if you could all respond one at a time to this question. Can you tell us what was the situation like in terms of anti-Semitism, BDS, pro-Palestinian activity, anti-Israel activity before October 7th? And then how has it changed after October 7th? Whoever wants to go first.
Guess I'll jump in. At Penn, it was really unique because prior to October 7th, there was already controversy around our president. On Yom Kippur, there was a Palestinian culture festival that was literature and culture festival that was hosted, and that's totally fine. That's valid. But at the same time, they had invited very anti-Semitic speakers to speak upon things that were not necessarily relating to Palestinian culture. Roger Waters, the lead singer of Pink Floyd, a number of other people who, should not be allowed on campuses inciting violent, rhetoric and thought. And the university totally signed off on it. Seemed like it didn't really care until backlash, came about naturally. And then the president, who's now gone, had to, be reactive and, then condemn certain things. And then prior to October 7th, there was an attack. As a result of this, someone attacked our Hillel. Someone vandalized it. So prior to, the attack, this was already a conversation at Penn, particularly around our president. And I will just say something that I learned as a result of everything. Many of you might think of Penn as a very Jewish school. Back decades ago, it was like 30% Jewish. I think now it's like 9%, 9 or 10. And while our community is very strong, it's certainly gone down. And it's raised a lot of questions as to why that is. And as we'll probably uncover in this panel, there are a number of reasons. And stuff like that, where our president and our administration didn't acknowledge that hosting a festival with, somewhat violent speakers on Yom Kippur when there are visibly Jewish people walking around everywhere, where people are coming from out of the state, out of the country to come see this, it has reason to believe that would, cause problems. But that's it in a nutshell.
So we definitely want to focus a little bit more on Penn because of what happened with the president and her testifying in Congress, so we'll get to that later. But now let's move on to Chapel Hill.
So prior to October 7th, at least for the time that I've been at UNC, it hasn't, anti-Semitism and BDS and Students for Justice in Palestine have not been too active or too big on campus. There's been instances, like before I got to UNC, that they had professors on the subject that were very one-sided, or they've invited speakers that said some things that incited backlash. And then there was one instance my freshman year where the professor on the Israel-Palestine conflict was definitely one-sided, not necessarily in Israel's favor. An instance from before October 7th that I can think of was after the summer that I got back from doing Birthright and working in Tel Aviv over the summer. I did Onward. Somebody wrote an op-ed for our newspaper that was kind of calling out Jewish students for studying abroad or visiting Israel and saying that we were supporting terrorism or something. I don't know what word he was using, but it ended up getting taken down because of all the backlash from Jewish students saying we were just visiting our heritage. Why are we being called out and being called names for this? So it honestly wasn't terrible before October 7th at all. Since October 7th, there's been a lot of rallies. There's been a lot of chalk all over the campus saying Free Palestine and silence is violence, other things, and that just doesn't seem to go away. It's always there. And there was some issues between a professor and some students. I think both parties were possibly in the wrong, but it was crazy. It made national news. And we have had a speaker since then that said that October 7th was a beautiful day.
Jeez.
So, yes.
So, you know, I'm sure there's some colleges we could say, you know, I mean, around the country, October 7th really hasn't made much of a dent on campus. People are going about their business before and after. And Wellesley College is not one of those places.
No,
Okay.
it's not. Even prior to October 7th, Wellesley has had quite an issue with anti-Semitism on campus. Last year, at the beginning of my junior year, the Wellesley Editorial, which is a student-run newspaper, published an article endorsing the mapping project in Boston, which mapped out Jewish businesses, Jewish homes, Jewish families all around Boston. And they responded when they received backlash by saying that it was only for boycotting of Israel, but clearly when you look at the list, it is anti-Semitic. They received a lot of backlash from that, but a lot of the students were on board with that, so there was quite a divide within the student body. However, I will say the administration at Wellesley is wonderful. Even this year, following October 7th, our president, Paula Johnson, met with all the Jewish parents who were concerned about their student safety. She took the time to meet with them. There was also backlash after that from other students, but that is not new. And the Jewish life at Wellesley is amazing. We have our rabbi there, Rabbi Dina. She takes the time to meet with us all the time whenever we feel the need. This semester I actually was in Geneva at the Geneva Graduate Institute, and I was dealing with some anti-Semitism over there. And I didn't really have anyone to turn to because there isn't any sort of Jewish life over there at all. But I emailed Rabbi Dina, and she took the time to meet with me over Zoom to discuss some of my concerns. And Rabbi Greengrass also held a meeting with several college students, and that was really helpful to be able to discuss while I was abroad. But I do have friends at Wellesley who were there this semester who have been dealing with this. Normally, the anti-Semitism on campus is much more hidden. They'll cover it by saying, oh, it's this, it's that. But following October 7th, it's been a lot more outright and outspoken. I know a friend of mine who's new to campus, is a freshman this year. She has had a lot of people around her say, I'm glad I'm not friends with any Jews, and that is just outright anti-Semitism. There's no covering that. And so there was actually an incident where an HP, a house president, how do I explain that? They are basically the RAs of the RAs. They're the head of the building. It's a student. Sent an email out to her community that supporting Israel was despicable, and anyone who does is disgusting, and it was this wildly anti-Semitic email, and isolated quite a few of the students in her building. And when the administration got word of this, they had a discussion with her that it was not her place to be saying this. She was supposed to be making it a welcoming environment for students, and this was doing the opposite. And she wrote an apology letter, but I had heard from many people on her private Instagram story that she said that she only wrote it because there was a gun to her head, and she did not believe any of what she had said. So Wellesley has been having some issues, but I will say that it has definitely made the Jewish community stronger. We meet very frequently. There's been a lot more attendance at Shabbat on Friday nights. Our rabbi actually does also a lunch and learn typically on Mondays, and several people will come and we'll discuss what's happening on campus or what's happening in the world. So it had its downsides, but it's definitely made us stronger.
At Wellesley, at the lunch and learns, can you get the kind of fruit and cookie spread that we put out here? Yeah.
We normally get bagels.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, yeah. That's too many carbs for a Miami crowd. Okay, Daniel Solomon from Brown.
So prior to October 7th, we ended last year, so I've been pretty involved in working with and speaking with administrators since last October. So a little bit of the picture in the year leading up to October 7th. There was an anti-Semitic incident that happened at our Hallel. Looking back, it seems kind of crazy that it was that was the pinnacle of anti-Semitism. It was a note left on the desk of the executive director of our Hallel saying, basically just anti-Semitic tropes. Obviously, the Jewish community took this very seriously. It was later found out that this was not by a Brown student, this was by a local Providence man, and had nothing to do with the Brown community. But however, in response, the administration sent an email that was sort of a catch-all saying, we condemn anti-Semitism, we also condemn racism, Islamophobia, LGBTQ hate, everything short of the price of tea in China. And it was, the Jewish community was upset by this. We met with administration, and the Vice President of Equity and Inclusion in turn said, you know what, you're absolutely right. This was not how we were supposed to handle the situation. How can we work with you and the Jewish community to strengthen the relationship between Jewish students and the administration, and how can we prevent things like this from happening in the future? How can we work together? And so from that point forward, we've had a very strong relationship with our administration. The Jewish community at Brown, over the past few years, has skyrocketed to, I think, over 25%. So, Evan, I think I know where the Jews have gone from Penn. I think there was an article in Tablet, maybe Inside Higher Ed, but the Jewish community is really, by population, really thriving in a very profound way. And the administration has been very supportive. Our president, Christina Paxson, was one of the keynote speakers at the Hillel International Israel Forum, or Israel Summit, where she spoke. She has demonstrated time and time again her support for Israel, her support for Jewish students. She herself is Jewish. She converted. Actually, she gave a very great speech at Torah Synagogue, which is the first synagogue in the U.S., called A Jew Named Christina. And so she has been a very strong supporter of Jewish students. In 2019, Brown's Undergraduate Council of Students, our student council, passed a BDS resolution. And the way that it works is that the resolution passes, it gets sent to the president, and then the president then has the choice whether to send that to the corporation, the board of directors. And I think another resolution was passed by the, I forgot the exact name, but it's the faculty committee on resource management or something like that. She again vetoed that to not go to the corporation. So, there's a very strong sentiment that, Christina Paxson is there to help and support us, and her administration is there to help and support us. But there is the question where, it's like, what happens, she can't be there forever. What happens when there's a new president? What happens when somebody replaces her, and what if they hold different views or have different experiences that would cause them to have these different courses of action? So up until October 7th, the situation at Brown, while there has been flickers here and there of different incidents, sometimes they have stuff on the main green, which is our main quad, posters, chalk. The administration has been a very, very strong supporter of Jewish students, of their right to support Israel on campus. Hillel came out with an email recently. The executive director sent an email saying, let me be clear, we support Israel. If you have a problem with that, that's who we are. It's in our DNA. So that's sort of been the situation on the ground. Obviously, it's spiraled since October 7th, but.
Okay, very good, very comprehensive and appreciative. Coming back to Evan, and then we'll go all the way down the row. Can you talk about in what ways the October 7th and everything that's happened since has affected you personally? And then can you also say, was there a little bit of, right when October 7th happened, was there an outpouring of sympathy for Jews on campus that then dissipated once Israel started to attack Gaza?
So I think I'll answer the second question first. When October 7th happened, there were, of course, as they have said, that the Jewish community really banded together my friends and I, and who were Jewish and not, all came together, and it was obviously appalling, and tried to do everything that we could to inform ourselves and inform other people. But what was really shocking is the fact that many members of our community seemed to not care and openly expressed support for what happened on October 7th. There were immediately rallies, pro-Palestinian rallies that were not necessarily tailored towards, let's, come up with an equitable solution. There was like genuine joy and happiness that came out from these people. Countless rallies where professors and students were chanting, "Go back to Brooklyn, go back to Berlin, go back to Moscow, you Zionists. There is only one solution, Intifada, revolution," to the point where there were rallies that were so big, that were hundreds in mass, that the Penn system had to send out an alert, don't leave your house.
Wow.
For anyone, not just Jews. To the point where for students who are going abroad this semester, they openly said on a big PowerPoint, don't wear anything of Jewish jewelry, don't talk about being Jewish, do not post anything online about being Jewish or pro-Israel. So what was really scary, yes, of course it was great, and it feels great that our community has banded together, and my friends and I and everyone I know has been very proud, but it's the fact that the reaction from the other side of people who I would classify as uninformed, they were happy. They seem to very much so support this, and whenever our president, who failed in many ways, would try and backtrack and try and support us, there were groups on campus that would literally come out and say, "You're wrong for backtracking. You got to continue." When this festival happened that I mentioned, the organization that helped put it on issued a response to the president's response, condemning all of anti-Semitism, saying that Liz McGill is in the pocket of the shadowy elites, and we're not in that pocket, and I really wonder what shadowy elites really means. I think it means Jew. And in terms of how it's affected me personally, I've always been very proud to be Jewish and openly Jewish and talk about my Zionism and my culture and my history, and never worried about that, and neither are my friends. But I will say it's definitely, number one, made me a little fearful of taking certain classes with teachers who might grade me poorly. Coincidentally, I was in a class this semester on Israel-Palestine, which was incredible, and honestly, it was very productive, and I learned a ton. So from that, I also gained an even greater desire and motivation to learn about the conflict, not necessarily just from the Zionist perspective, and not even necessarily from the political perspective, but in taking in every single kind of morsel of information from a good source, from history, from opposing views, to really understand what's going on, which I will just say, to go back to my first comment, that a lot of people on both sides, but mainly on the other side, don't seem to care to do. They don't seem to care to actually investigate this situation from every angle that it should be, being that it is so complex. And I'm not going to say that I'm the arbiter of all information on this topic. I'm 21, I don't know that much. But when I listen to my students, my fellow students chant these things about going back to Brooklyn, going back to Berlin, chanting Intifada, globalize the Intifada, right outside my dorm or outside my house or outside my classroom, and seeing my professors doing the same thing, tweeting on Twitter the only good Jew is a dead one. Yeah. That is outrageous, and it makes me fearful for the next crop of students who will come out of Penn. It makes me fearful for the next crop of students who will come out of any of our universities, people who will be voting the same way that I will, people who will be engaging in society and influencing people, the next generation. And that really does, I guess, to answer even this first question about how it has affected me personally, it's made me scared for the future of our generation and generations to come, because as much as we try and be informed, and people who are on the other side try and be informed, there are so many who just don't care. They find themselves in a rabbit hole and a vortex of social media information and tropes and headlines that don't actually paint the full picture. Wow. And to really understand this incredibly complex situation, you really need to try. And people don't seem to want to. But I'll leave it with that I have really made a point, myself and my friends, we all have tried to become a resource for people who don't understand the situation, to become informed. Not brainwashing them, not telling them how to think, but telling them where to look for information, where to reach these conclusions for themselves, and engaging in real dialogue, not just arguing, which it seems as if, for a lot of people, it's impossible to have a real conversation because they just don't seem to want to have a conversation, because they're so stuck in this perception they have that they got from parents or friends or social media or frankly, nonsense that doesn't seem to make any sense. So.
Well, Evan doesn't speak, I don't think you speak like the average 21-year-old American. I don't think the average American 21-year-old speaks this eloquently or cogently. But you may know Evan's a local celebrity. There's a sandwich named after him at Joanna's. So right. So you're looking at someone who's pretty well known in our area. Okay, Mia, how has this affected you personally?
So on October 7th, I actually was not at school. I was on a retreat. We were in the mountains that weekend. I was with my Jewish sorority. So it was like 23 of us or so. We were all in an Airbnb in the mountains, and we woke up to the news. It was very nice to be with the other Jewish girls on campus while we were hearing about what happened. And so UNC is not necessarily a school that draws very practicing Jews or extremely religious Orthodox or conservative Jews. It's mostly Reform students. So it's not an extremely involved Jewish community. It's not like all 1,500 Jewish students on campus go to Shabbat every week. But the Hillel hosted a vigil, I think the Wednesday after October 7th, and that was the busiest I've ever seen it. There was not enough room for everybody. A lot of people were standing, so it was very heartening to see everybody come together like that. The way it's affected me, I remember when the first pro-Palestine rally was going to happen. People were advised, or like Jewish students were kind of advising each other not to go to campus, just to be smart about it. And luckily for me, this semester, my classes, for the most part, were on the outskirts of campus, so I didn't have to walk through the quad to go to any of my classes. So I didn't really go to campus that day. And then I kind of found myself not going to campus at all. I went to my classes. Don't worry, Mommy and Daddy. But sometimes you could walk around campus to get to the gym, to get to the dining halls, and I didn't have to enter campus to go to my classes. And it was very few times that I did go to campus this semester, and when I did, I saw chalk and graffiti everywhere about anti-Israel stuff, and I saw posters and stickers, and it didn't make me feel very happy or comfortable about it, so I kind of just avoided it, and I realized that I think subconsciously it had a lot to do with that.
So as I said earlier, I actually spent the semester abroad. I was in Geneva, and it was very different, I think, than what I would have expected if I was at Wellesley. I had to walk past the UN every day to get to campus, which was very cool at the beginning of the semester, but after October 7th was sort of scary. There were often protests in front of that area, but there were many pro-Palestine protests there that would move. So on those days when I knew they had those protests, I would stay in my room. I would avoid going out. I also hid my necklace, which I tend to wear, because I was a little concerned about the other students in my program. They were very vocal about their opinions, and I was a little worried about them and how they would react if they knew that I was Jewish. But I also took the opportunity, because most of the people that I met are from many different countries around the world. There was a man from Iran, there was someone from Algeria, from India, so from Japan, so all over. I took the opportunity to actually, because most of these people will never meet a Jew in their life, Hanukkah happened while I was there, and I took the time to host a Hanukkah dinner and tell the story and sort of slip in those little Zionist notes to them slightly. And it was very nice because they were actually open to learning about it. Even if they were still going to the pro-Palestine protests, they were at least open to learning about sort of the differences, the different side that they had never heard before. But I was still fairly concerned. The faculty were also very pro-Palestine. One of my professors who I went to speak with about an essay that I was writing had a Visit Palestine poster, a large one, in her office, and I was like, okay, cannot write about Israel in any of my essays. Got it. So that was a little disheartening because some of the topics in international relations I did want to discuss Israel, and I couldn't. And additionally, the student government, I'm not really sure what it is, decided to send out this vote to condemn Israel, and it passed in the student body and was published and signed all students. And I was like, that seems a little ridiculous to sign it all students, whatever. But that was an issue as well, and it made it a little difficult on campus, not knowing anyone else who was Jewish there. So it did make things a little difficult in terms of my coursework as well. But thankfully, some of the courses I was in I was in an economics class that did not care what was happening in the world. So that one I was able to maintain myself in. I could just keep doing what I was doing, and it didn't change anything. But it definitely did affect me personally in that I was a lot more scared being there. Geneva is normally a very safe city, but I was sometimes out with friends, and I'd see massive rallies of hundreds or even thousands of people walking down the street. And I was like, I'm going to go the other direction. I am not going to go anywhere near that. So that was sort of an issue. Yeah.
Okay, Daniel. Thank you, Jake.
So Friday evening, I think this was the evening of October 6th because, the time difference, I was writing a paper it was due at 11:59, so of course I was playing my favorite game, the race to 11:59 p.m. And I was in the library and I got a news notification on my phone, of the initial events that were happening. And I put down my phone and I was like, I need to finish my paper. It's due in a few hours. I need to get this done. That was the last time that I was really able to dismiss a notification on my phone that had to do with Israel. It just so happened that weekend I was heading with my friends to go off campus for the weekend, and so I was kind of, isolated in a way. But the hours after October 7th were pretty insane. The Students for Justice in Palestine had an emergency meeting where they were praising, glorifying, and not only just praising and glorifying and celebrating, but figuring out strategies on how to divert campus attention, literally within hours of the October 7th attacks. They were figuring out strategies and mechanisms that they could skew public perception, how they can dismiss Jewish voices, how they can justify rape as part of the resistance movement, or however they put it. They were really figuring out ways on how they could completely deflect the entire situation and somehow make it Jewish and Israeli people's faults. So that was pretty surreal. And so we actually got a hold of those, anonymously got a hold of the minutes from the meeting, from the emergency meeting on October 8th, and we read them, and it was insane. Something that I'm sure is happening at your campuses too is, so there is an app that's an anonymous message board, and you can only access this app, this message board, if you log in with your credentials, so your appbrown.edu email. And so but every message that's on this app is anonymous. It's called side chat. There are other variations called Yik Yak and others. And so anyone can post anything with no accountability. And I've been, working with administration and talking with administration about this. But the reality is that, just because somebody posts something that is clearly in violation of the university's student conduct policy, the university has no ability to actually monitor what's going on SideChat because it's an independent third-party company. And so somebody can say something that is blatantly against university policy, but as long as it isn't actually illegal, so much so is that, the only way to access, apparently, the only way to actually figure out who sends what message is by way of subpoena. And so this has been a real problem that we have been battling, because we have the rampant disinformation that's circulating on social media, the rallying cries, the chants, the buzzwords that people are, so easily drawn to. And then we have this completely anonymous, unregulated message board of people spewing this horrible rhetoric. And we have, come across doxing, which is when, is particularly on social media, where they publicize the face of individuals who engage in certain activities. So for instance, there was a large cohort of students that went to the march in Washington, the March for Israel, sponsored by Hillel with the Hillel director. And a picture of us at the march was published on the Brown Rizdi Hillel Instagram, and SJP had a field day with this. They then went on to crop our faces, publish on SideChat. If you see this person, they support genocide, they're a colonizer, they're this, they're that. And it's, it's actually really ridiculous. So so while this phenomenon is going on the flip side, the administration recognizes how awful and almost just how surreal this is. I was speaking with, one high-level administrator, and he was saying, if we could ban SideChat tomorrow morning, that's what we would do. So we're trying to figure out ways to sort of, calm the situation and sort of create different avenues that don't hinder free speech, but also have accountability. So that's sort of been what's going on.
So, right now in the world, the Turks are bombing the Kurds. There are concentration camps for the Uyghurs in China. Sudan is having a terrible civil war. There are atrocities in Iran against women that are beyond belief. Gay and lesbian people are being murdered throughout the Middle East. For those issues, how's the fervor on campus?
No one cares.
No? Okay.
No one. Reality is, people seem to hold a double standard against Jewish people, and they always have. There should be 100% attention to all of these atrocities.
So you answered my.
Yeah.
You recognize I was saying it facetiously. Why do you four think that this issue is so profound on campus, but all the other atrocities in the world, which, by the way, make Israel pale in comparison, because this is a war that Hamas started. We don't need to get into all that. But why does everyone ignore all the real atrocities and only focus on this one on college campuses?
I mean, it's really complicated, I think.
So I just want to tell you, you all speak beautifully, but we're running out of time, and I want to leave questions for everyone. So if you could each maybe give me 3 minutes on this one, and then we'll move on to the next question.
I think it's really complicated, and obviously 3 minutes isn't enough.
Well,
an hour wouldn't be enough.
Well,
but
3 minutes each,
I think it comes in line. There's a number of things at play. I think in terms of our attention in America, I think it becomes a political issue that it seems, unfortunately, that Jews face a wild double standard when it comes to our existence and our rights, and we're a minority, but yet we're the oppressor, and that we're the white colonial rich Jew. But at the same time, if you look at the population of Israel, we are most definitely not just white people. Like, it's insane. And in these in this day and age, I think there is an attack on people who are perceived to have power. A lot of people on college campuses who identify with socialist ideologies and really radical beliefs, they want to tear down the oppressor. And in this situation, the Jew is the oppressor, the white, rich, colonial oppressor. And unfortunately, that seems also tied in with the fact that America supports Israel, and the same people who want to tear down Israel, I would argue, want to tear down our institutions and implement other, whether that be socialist or anarchist, who knows. But I think it really comes down to the fact that there is a clear disconnect between, actually promoting peace and prosperity and, fairness among all with, attacking who are perceived as the oppressor. And I think at the end of the day, it goes back to anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism has existed for thousands of years, before Islam, before Christianity. And it's something that, while we can try and understand where it comes from, it's at the end of the day, we're the scapegoat for a lot of people. The Jew becomes whatever the person against us wants us to be.
Right.
We're the white person when we're not supposed to be white. We're the minority when we're supposed to be, we're in control of everything, but yet we're 15 million people. At the end of the day, it really just comes back to the fact that anti-Semitism is just as prevalent today as it has been in the past. That, as we know, October 7th is the worst attack on Jews since the Holocaust, but this has been happening for decades. Look at the intifadas in Israel, look at bombings in Argentina, look at the Munich Games. It's existed across decades since the Holocaust, before the Holocaust. It's the reason Israel exists. And at the end of the day, I'll pass it on. It's something that we all have to be aware of and can never get too comfortable with, is the fact that this is very prevalent today, just as it was decades ago and centuries ago.
Beautifully stated. Beautifully stated. Mia, can I just ask you another question, a different question, because you are the only one here representing a school that's not in the Northeast. You talked about the different chalk things and the stickers and the Palestinian and anti-Zionist stuff that you've seen around campus. On your campus, would you say that the majority of students, or what percentage of students, support Israel, don't care, or are supporting the Palestinians? I mean, there seems to be this idea that in the South, in Southern schools, the pro-Palestinian fervor isn't as great as it is in the Northeast. But how does it really break down on your campus?
That was actually part of how I was going to answer the previous question with that I think it's, a lot of it can be, because the issue has become politicized. I think that's one reason that it is carrying on even longer than other issues have. But especially at UNC and in North Carolina, it is very politicized because it's a state that has historically been red, and that is and the red side is taking one stance on the issue. But most of the liberal thinkers in the state end up at my campus. So there's always been like a push and pull between the Board of Trustees and the school itself, because the school wants to honor its students and wants to honor what people at the school are wanting, whereas the Board of Trustees has a different idea of what should be done with the school. I think that it is definitely less vile. There's not as much hatred going around on campus as there is in these campuses in the Northeast. But I would say, being an extremely liberal school, that I think the majority of students are pro-Palestine. They're not as open about it. They're not going to be approaching Jewish students and saying things to them, although some people claim that did happen. So, and then there aren't. It's not as full of hate, but everybody's Instagrams, everybody's social medias are constantly being reposting things, putting Israel in a terrible light, or saying that Jews are genocidal monsters, or at least Zionists are, because that's different. They mean it in a different way, of course. So it's slightly different, but I think the majority of the campus is pro-Palestine. But UNC is a more liberal focus, is like the liberal haven of North Carolina. That's what they call it, whether they mean that in a good way or a bad way. And it's different from other Southern schools in that regard as well.
Okay. Very interesting and disheartening. Julie, let me ask you the same question, but in a little bit of a different way. When the war ends, if the war was to end today, would the issue still remain with the same fervor, or do you think when the war is over, it will die out a little bit?
I'd say at Wellesley, the issue would probably remain because the students at Wellesley, I don't know who's branding Hamas, I don't know who's behind that, but they have used all of the liberal buzzwords that get these people going.
Yeah.
Colonialism, apartheid, genocide, all those words. And so I believe that with the Wellesley students, they're very pro-Palestine, most of them.
Right.
I believe that whatever solution were to come, if it was not the annihilation of Israel and the return of all of it to the Palestinians, they would be upset with it,
Right.
and they would continue to march and to rally because it's not what they want, and they think that it's unfair in some way. So I think it would probably remain an issue regardless, which is unfortunate, but they have no interest in peaceful solutions.
Jeez.
They just want violence.
Daniel, the people that you hear from, the pro-Palestinian groups, the people who are, at all of your schools, the students are thoughtful or they wouldn't be there. So these aren't the morons on the street that you see who don't know anything about anything. These are smart kids. But do you get the sense that the people who are espousing pro-Palestinian views really know what they're talking about? Or do they really not understand what's actually the history of Israel and the Palestinians?
I think the latter. Brown has a very long and very proud history of student activism. It's something that's sort of very much a part of the DNA of Brown. In the late 60s, Brown passed it's called the open curriculum, and it's really the foundation on which academic life on Brown is based. I mean, that's like the main thing about Brown, the open curriculum. And the open curriculum was founded because of student activism. So student activism is really such a core part of what it means to be a Brown student and what it means to study at Brown. So you see in the museum, there's like a museum section of University Hall, which is the main building, of all of the student activism that has taken place throughout the decades. Vietnam War, race-based admissions, need-blind admissions, all of the anti-CIA protests. You see all of these different movements throughout history, and you see the same images over and over again. You see students staging a protest, staging a sit-in in University Hall, where the president's office, the provost's office, the dean of the college, and then there's always an iconic picture of one of students being taken out of University Hall in handcuffs by a Brown police officer, and that's always what people consider to be noble causes. And then what's happening is you have, what's happening now, post-October 7th, 20 students were arrested. Then again, 41 students were arrested in University Hall for protests, for sit-ins. And you see the pictures of people walking out in handcuffs with a Brown police officer, and with literally zero other context, you see, well, this happened here, which looks like that picture, which looks like that picture, which looks like that picture. They were right then, they must be right now. And that's just not the reality. The reality is that this is not Vietnam War. This is not need-blind admissions. This is not any of those other concepts. This is completely separate. And unfortunately, I don't have to go too far to find some of these students, because 2 of the students arrested were in my 8-person Hebrew class. So there is what I would consider very, very small but very vocal, which I think epitomizes the entirety of the situation, group of Jews for ceasefire.
Wow. Okay, so we have about 15 minutes left. I'm very happy to take any questions. I'll ask you, if you have a question, please feel free. But I ask you to use the mic to ask your questions so that the people at home will be able to hear. So I'll go 1, 2, and 3, and then we'll...
Hi, I'm Susan Lamp, and I only hope I can be as articulate as all of you. What you describe is simply harrowing. Some surprise, but basically gut-wrenching and no surprise. Growing up at Beth Am and growing up in Miami, I'm wondering, looking back, what would have been helpful to you to be prepared in some way for this anti-Semitism that has not suddenly arisen, but perhaps, and I'm making an assumption, that you were protected from. And I'm thinking about 7th graders, 8th graders, high school students. What more do they need from their institutions, their educational institutions, and from Temple Beth Am to be prepared. I know AJC has a LIFT program. There are many educational opportunities here in our spiritual home, but I'm feeling a little remiss that my children grew up in a bubble and my grandchildren are growing up in a bubble, and I can recall clergy members saying, no, there isn't anti-Semitism going on in the years that my children grew up. What would you recommend? What are your thoughts? Think a little bit forward to the time when you're going to be in your 30s, 40s, may choose to have children, may not. What would you do differently?
I can take this.
Go ahead. Daniel, you have 3 minutes.
3 minutes, okay. I would say continue with programming, continue at Beth Am. You know, I heard that Rabbi Barras has an incredible Torah Scholars program. Continue learning, but also we talk about the bubble. We talk about, you know, living in such a strong, vibrant Jewish bubble. But I also think that if we want our young people to go to college and be the most well-informed that they possibly can be, to be advocates for the Jewish people, for Israel, that also means learning about conflicting viewpoints. So I would actually argue that one important thing that we can do is to learn about and to understand different perspectives, because what I perceive as the main problem is that some people want to make this a black and white issue, and it's not a black and white issue. It's a very nuanced issue with very different opinions and a lot of different moving parts. And so I think that the greatest thing that I could recommend would be to really develop a greater holistic understanding of the situation, and you know, it will prevail.
Definitely recommend the Rabbi Barras Scholars class.
I just find it interesting that one of the presidents, Kornbluth, happens to be Jewish. You hear nothing about her. Is this some form of reverse discrimination?
Well,
Or reverse
so
tolerance?
yeah, we've been fortunate that Liz McGill is gone and that Claudine Gay is gone, and Kornbluth, who happens to be Jewish at MIT, is still there. We're working as hard as we can to get rid of her. Her answers were as disgraceful as the other two, and we continue to talk to our friends in Congress to make it happen, but so far MIT hasn't budged yet, but we're trying. We're trying. Abe and then Adrian, I'll just bring you, if you could pass the mic back, and then we may, well, we'll see. Maybe we have time for one or two more after that. Nothing from home.
I understand that Kornbluth didn't have time to meet with a group of Jewish students and faculty during this whole period of time.
Yeah, well, we're not done with her yet.
A question to the ladies there: have you heard of any response by the women's organizations against the atrocities that Hamas has committed? I haven't heard of any response to that. And the other thing is how would you respond to a Hillel rabbi at Columbia who refuses to have a pro-Israel program unless there's a pro-Palestinian one with it?
Well, I will say Wellesley is a women's college, so campus is entirely women. And on that campus, it has been very pro-Palestinian. They deny a lot of what has happened. They say it didn't happen. They say it was an exaggeration, and then they go on to say that it was the IDF soldiers that did it. They have so many stories that they've made up for this, and it's really disheartening because, like, the stories that we hear about these women who were attacked and raped in Israel is awful. Sorry. And they just continue to deny it.
I haven't heard of a single women's organization stand up or stand against what happened or say anything about it, honestly. So I don't think they're doing a very good job with that.
I just want to say that I am so in awe of all of you, and you represent the young who is going to carry us forward in this next generation, and we are in wonderful hands. Keep doing what you're doing and keep spreading the word, because I think the apathy, as you said, amongst the young is very prevalent, and I believe that if you are advocates, you can change the world. So thank you, thank you. I just want you to know how proud we are of you.
Beautiful. Okay, oh yeah, Aaron. And then I have one question that is unfair and really hard, and we'll see if you want to answer it or not. But
Do any of you feel that you do any activities that might bolster anti-Semitism?
I mean, I want to make money, and people think Jews just love money. And, like, I mean, I'm partially kidding, but partially serious. Like, when I go to, school and take classes in Wharton in the business school, like, I can only imagine that when I leave school with my star on, I can see some of these pro-Palestine, supporters being like, oh, look at that Jew, he's going to study finance and, make money and control the financial system. Right. So I will say, like, being a Jew is what was what bolsters anti-Semitism on my campus. Being a proud, open Jew with interests and passions and being able to speak out. Because there's nothing I can do short of being an anti-Zionist Jew that any pro-Palestinian will, or a radical pro-Palestinian will, accept. So it's me living my life. I don't think there's one particular thing that, going to temple, going to, pro-Israel rallies, writing articles, yeah, that might specifically amplify certain people, but it's my existence as a whole, I would say, that really frustrates people.
Okay, how many of you went to Camp Coleman or a URJ camp?
no.
All right, well, you know what the camps are. Do you think that going to a camp like that would bolster anti-Semitic feelings?
I think it's the opposite. I would think that any type of Jewish programming, whether that be in Israel, at camp, at Beth Am with Rabbi Barras, anything that can bring people together and get people talking about just their culture, and even forget about the politics when you're 8 years old, just talking about your culture and being proud of being a Jew in any capacity, even if it's not, forced down, anything, that's good. And I think that, yes, a proud Jew, again, going back to what I said, a proud Jew is frustrating and might bolster anti-Semitism for the anti-Semites, but I think it's far more important for Jewish people to be together and to live Jewish lives so we can keep frustrating those people. I don't think unfortunately, I'll just say, I don't think anti-Semitism is going to go away. It has existed since the dawn of the Jew. So, I just think the best thing we can do is live proud Jewish lives in every way we can.
But if I say I was a 12-year-old Hispanic kid or black kid or Palestinian kid, and I went on a tour at Camp Coleman or another URJ camp when camp is in session, how do you think that kid would feel?
So I've actually met a surprising amount, not a big amount, but still surprising amount of non-Jews who, at UNC, who worked at their JCCs at home, or who, or have friends who went to a sleepaway camp that wasn't Jewish, but the owners were Jewish and they had Shabbat services every week. And the non-Jews that I've met that have been immersed into Jewish culture at different times in their life actually appreciate us more and hold more love in their hearts for us because they've gotten to experience us as a people. And so I think it would do the opposite, actually. Unless they already had a stigma against Jews and they were going, and then they thought that people being Jewish was a danger to them, then maybe seeing that might make them hate us, but otherwise I don't think so. I think it would help.
Okay. Any other? We have time for one or two more. Anyone have? No? Okay, Judy? No.
So knowing what you know now about the administrations in your schools and the reaction that people had, if you were now applying to school,
that was my last question.
Great minds, what can I say?
All right.
If you are now applying to school, would you apply to the same place?
Good, you took me off the hook.
So I would say, despite all of Wellesley's flaws and all of the issues that it has, I would still apply. The education is amazing, and as much as some of the students are swayed easily by social media, the administration is actually amazing. They take the time to meet with the students. They're concerned about us. So I'd say that I would still apply. It's a great education, but now that I'm aware of it, I'd sort of warn other students who are applying that this is something that they might face, but just remaining strong in who they are and their Jewish identity, becoming part of that Jewish community there, making friends there, it'll be okay. The unfortunate thing is that there's anti-Semitism everywhere, so you just need to find a place where you feel the most safe or the most benefit despite the issues that you face.
Wow.
I just want to add to that I think I most definitely would have applied to Penn. I should have probably applied to Wharton, but that's a different conversation. But most importantly, I think that any student should still apply to these colleges because there needs to be a robust opposition to what is happening. Well, I said that at Penn we are now 9% or so Jewish. That 9% is very proud, very outspoken, very involved. And it would be a shame to see a school like Penn lose its robust, proud Zionist and Jewish community out of fear that they're going to be discriminated against. We're going to be discriminated against everywhere. So you might as well go to whatever school appeals to you outside of that and live that strong Jewish life so you can stand up to these people, because if we all congregate in one place at Tulane or UF, we're just going to be in a it's where all my friends go. You just have to. There needs to be opposition at every school. And,
okay. Last question.
Oh,
Here.
I got the impression listening to you that these are very much domestic as opposed to international students who are leading these demonstrations, but I'm wondering, and did you feel that there was any outside of campus participation on campus riling it up?
I'll pass this on to my friends, but I will say at Penn, there was a student from Jordan who got arrested for ripping down my neighbor's Israeli flag and speaking at a rally saying that October 7th was glorious and that it should happen again and again. And so yes, there are, at least at Penn, is a very vibrant international community, and that does happen where it exists on both sides. I would say it is very prominently homegrown though, and that is a longer conversation to have about education systems and teachers and stuff. But
I agree in that I think it's majority domestic students, but there are definitely international students that if they feel a tie to the conflict, depending on where they're from, they're the people that sometimes the US students look to and use their voices to amplify them and say oh, they're from this area. They know what they're talking about. So it's not only a domestic issue. I forgot the second part of your question, but I had a good answer.
On campus or?
Oh, so UNC, Chapel Hill is a college town, so there's some families that live there, but it's not really a big city that people would be going to or people have access to as easily. So it's not, you didn't see much many off-campus people coming to campus.
I will say for Wellesley, it's technically in Boston, but it's out in the suburbs somewhere. So mostly what would happen is the students would go from Wellesley to some protest in the city and not vice versa. And Wellesley is a very closed campus. There's security. They don't really let outside people on. There's been some issues with that. But I'd say when it comes to the protests on campus, it's a mix of both international and domestic students. Wellesley has a large international student body. So they definitely are a large driving force in part. But I will say that these issues are also appearing abroad. When I was in Geneva, most of the students that I was with were international because there were only a handful that were actually from Switzerland itself. And they were really the driving forces of those protests. So I'd say abroad it is much more international, but I'd say on college campuses it's probably a little more either 50-50 or leaning more towards the domestic group.
Okay. Daniel, I'll give you the last word, and then we'll call it a day.
I have not seen or heard of outside people coming onto Brown's campus as part of these demonstrations. Also, granted, I'm not engaging in these demonstrations, so I'm really not 100% sure. While not necessarily international students, definitely students that are that are not white have tried to associate their personal experiences with the conflict and with the war. You know, some of them are kind of ridiculous, and I say actually talking about the Miami and the bubble. There was a Latin Student Association, and you know, saying like Latin students, you know, stand with Palestine or whatever it is. And you know, me being from Miami, you know, have you ever heard of a Jubin? I mean, there are really students that have never even heard of the concept of a Jewish Hispanic person. And so, you know, I feel like really, and you know, one of my very good friends is Black Jewish, and so I feel like people think that, you know, again, as Evan said, it's very, very much in the opinion that Jews are white and etc. Really quickly on the question, you know, would I still apply to Brown? Would I still go to Brown? The answer is absolutely. The Jewish community is undoubtedly very strong, and often, you know, while these protests are going on, while this activity is going on, the loudest voices are not always the voices that are speaking the truth, and I think that that is absolutely the case here. These are loud people. They want to be heard, and I do not think that it's the majority of Brown students. I still think that, you know, the sentiment that we had pre-October 7th, where we said, you know, it's never been a better time to be a Jew at Brown, I still think that is true, despite everything that's going on. Yeah.
Wow, how about it? Thank you. Thank you so much to Evan, to Mia, Julia, and Daniel. Truly, you know, you couldn't just put any college student on short notice up here like this. But when you have 4 students like this who are so thoughtful, who are so proud of being Jewish, and are just such great examples of what we want Beth Am and the Jewish people to be, then it's really, really easy. So thank you so much. They all came on short notice, and we really, really appreciate it. You're all fabulous. God willing, you know, and I really believe this, even though it's going to take a lot of work. But I've been fighting against what's been going on college campuses for 20 years. And for 20 years, we've made 0 progress. 0. In fact, we've only been watching it getting worse and getting worse and getting worse. We never imagined a war like this in Israel. We never thought it could be possible that Israel could take such a blow. But only now is the world realizing how bad the problem is on college campuses. And that's why you see Congress starting to act. And if you say nothing's happening, well, you know, the president of Harvard and also she has a copy problem, but the president of Penn and the president of Harvard are no longer there. That's progress. We've got a long way to go, but at least everyone knows what's going on. And when I was watching the 3 of them testify in what was, maybe you could argue, the most disgraceful testimony in American history before Congress, I was watching it and I was saying, yes, yes, you're admitting it. You're not even hiding it anymore. Yes, say it louder. Deny it more. It was great. Because if they would have went up there and said, oh, yeah, it's a terrible problem, and Congress would have said, oh, see, they get it. And they proved how deep the rot was. And I could see each of them thinking to themselves, and they all had this, wry smile that they were going to go back to their faculties and say, see, I showed them. You know, see, I stood up. And then they got back, and even their faculties told them that they were pathetic. But at least people are starting to see that there's a problem. And hopefully you guys are the beginning of coming to change, to real change. It's disgraceful that you should even have to deal with this. You're in college to have fun, to learn, to grow, to make friends. You shouldn't have to deal with this. And we're going to make it so that someday Jewish kids don't have to deal with this on college campus. And I'm so sorry that you have to deal with this, but I'm so proud of how you're doing it. You're really shining stars of our people, and you're heroes of our people, and that means a lot. So thank you all very much, and thank you to our people. All right. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for coming. Wow, you guys are amazing. That was great.
Where should we put these chairs?
I'll just leave them there.
There was a very, very powerful element on campus.
Powerful who?
Powerful element on campus of Jewish faculty members. Was a tremendous presence in influential spots.
Yeah,
Do you still sense that?
I do. The head of the Watson Institute for International Public Affairs is Jewish. There are especially a lot in STEM, which is very helpful, non-humanities. I still think that that's true, and I think that they're pushing it in the background. But something that I really